Her Italian stopped the crystal room colder than the broken glass at her feet. Forks hovered in midair. A violin track from the hidden speakers kept playing, soft and expensive, but nobody heard it now. Every eye in the private dining room turned toward the black waitress beside the fallen champagne flute, her tray tilted, her face still, her voice the only thing that had cut through the polished cruelty of the night. "Elena, piano," Amara said gently in Italian. "Your hand is shaking again." The older woman froze before anyone else did. Not because of the spill, because Amara had not spoken like a tourist collecting pretty phrases. She had spoken like someone who had once lived inside the language. Clean vowels, fluent softness, the kind of Italian that carried memory, not performance. Across the table, Luca looked up from his phone so sharply his chair scraped the floor. A minute earlier, his attention had belonged to investors, to numbers, to the small theater of power-rich men performed when they thought service workers were furniture. He had barely noticed Amara beyond the efficiency of her hands. Then one sentence changed the shape of the room. Elena pressed her fingers to the edge of the tablecloth. "Come high, Detto," she whispered. "How did you say that?" Amara lowered the tray and stepped closer, careful, composed. "I said your hand is shaking. Are you feeling dizzy?" That was the first real fracture of the evening. Not the broken glass. Not the silence. Luca's certainty. Because his mother never let strangers hear weakness in her voice. Yet now she looked at Amara, not at him, with the stunned tenderness people reserve for impossible things. One of the guests let out a small laugh, trying to rescue the room with mockery. "Well, that's unexpected." Luca did not laugh. He stood, slow, deliberate. His gaze moved from the shards on the carpet to Amara's face, and for the first time all night, he actually saw her. The calm in her posture, the intelligence she wasn't displaying for approval, the restraint of someone who knew exactly how rooms like this worked. "What did you just say to her?" he asked in English. Amara met his eyes without flinching. "I asked if she was dizzy." The question was simple. The effect was not. Elena's hand trembled again, harder now. The water goblet beside her rattled against its plate. Luca moved instantly toward her, but Amara was already there, setting one steady hand near Elena's wrist, not touching until invited. "May I?" she asked. Elena nodded. Amara crouched beside her chair, lowering herself out of the hierarchy of the table and into the truth of the moment. "When did this start?" "Since this afternoon," Elena admitted in Italian, embarrassed. Luca stared. "You're telling me this now?" Elena didn't answer him. She kept looking at Amara. That hurt him more than it should have. Amara glanced up at Luca then, and there was nothing submissive in her expression. No challenge either. Just urgency. She needs to sit back and breathe slowly. He obeyed before thinking about it. The room noticed. So did he. Within seconds, silence. The guests who had come to admire Luca's empire were now watching him take instruction from the waitress carrying the wine list 10 minutes ago. The power in the room had not vanished. It had moved. Amara asked Elena 3 quick questions in Italian. Headache, blurred vision, food, water. Her tone was warm but precise, and Luca caught enough to understand that this was not small talk. This was triage born from experience. "You speak Italian like family," Elena said, still in that language. A flicker crossed Amara's face. "Brief. Private. I studied in Florence," she answered. "Years ago." Luca felt the sentence land before he understood why. Studied. Not visited. Not picked up a few words. Studied. He opened his mouth to ask more, but Amara was already making a decision that changed the night. "She shouldn't stay here," Amara said, switching back to English so everyone could understand. "She needs to be checked tonight." Crystal glasses stopped clinking. Even the piano player seemed to miss a note. The elegant private dining room at Moretti House had looked untouchable an hour earlier. Gold light on polished walnut, a skyline glittering past the windows, 8 social circle guests dressed like magazine covers. Now fear had thinned the air. Elena Moretti sat too still at the head of the table, one hand pressed to her chest, color draining from her face, while a half-finished spoonful of soup cooled beside her. Amara Bennett did not ask permission twice. She stepped to Elena Moretti's side, crouched low, and spoke in calm, measured Italian again, soft enough to comfort, clear enough to steady. Look at me. Breathe slowly. Are you dizzy? Is the pain moving? Luca Moretti heard every word this time. Not as a novelty, as proof. This woman had not been performing. She had been protecting his mother. One of the guests muttered that it was probably indigestion. Another suggested calling the house driver in the morning. Wealth often confused delay with control. Amara Bennett did not. Tonight, she said, already reaching for Elena Moretti's wrist. Not tomorrow. That was the first line she crossed. Not the language. Not the confidence. Authority. Luca Moretti had spent years making rooms obey him with a glance. Yet in that moment, the room shifted around Amara Bennett instead. She checked Elena Moretti's pulse, watched her breathing, and looked directly at Luca Moretti with a steadiness that refused to bend. If you want to help your mother, stop letting people guess, Amara Bennett said. She needs a hospital. The words hit him harder because they were true. For one dangerous second, pride rose first. A waitress telling him what to do. In his own home. In front of people who measured weakness like currency. Then Elena Moretti's fingers tightened around the edge of the chair. Pride died fast. Luca Moretti turned sharply. Get the car. No one moved. Within seconds, silence. Because the command had gone to the room in general, and the room had fallen into the stupid paralysis of expensive people unaccustomed to urgency. Amara Bennett broke it by grabbing Elena Moretti's shawl, folding it around her shoulders, and kneeling close enough to keep her from tipping forward. Call 911. Amara Bennett snapped to one of the restaurant staff who had accompanied the catered service and was frozen near the doorway. Tell them chest pain, shortness of breath, female, 62, responsive. Action returned like breath after drowning. A phone came out. A chair scraped back. The piano stopped completely. Luca Moretti stared at Amara Bennett for half a beat, then made a choice that changed more than the night. He stopped protecting his image and started following her lead. He moved beside his mother. What do you need? It was not a question he asked often. Amara Bennett answered without ceremony. Her medication, her purse, and tell the front gate to clear the drive. He did all three. That was the second line crossed. Not by her. By him. The billionaire who owned the room had just taken instructions from a woman carrying a server's tray 20 minutes earlier. The guests saw it. More importantly, Luca Moretti saw it too. In the elevator down to the lobby, Elena Moretti leaned weakly against the mirrored wall. The city lights streaked silver over the glass. Amara Bennett stayed beside her, one hand near her elbow but not gripping, giving support without stealing dignity. In Italian, Elena Moretti whispered something hoarse and embarrassed. I ruined his dinner. Amara Bennett answered gently, no. You revealed who was worth trusting. Luca Moretti looked up at that. Something opened in his face and closed again just as fast. Outside, the cold Manhattan air slapped everyone awake. The ambulance lights arrived in pulsing red across the stone driveway, painting the mansion in emergency colors no architect could design around. The three-person medical team took over with fast questions, a stretcher, clipped movements. Amara Bennett gave a cleaner summary than anyone else there. When did the pain start? About 15 minutes ago. Any history? I don't know. By the time the ambulance doors shut, the mansion had already changed owners in a way money could not explain. Silence had replaced the clink of crystal. Fear had stripped performance from every face in the driveway. Under the wash of red emergency lights, Luca Moretti stood motionless for half a second too long, watching Elena Moretti disappear into the night with strangers guiding the stretcher and Amara Bennett's steady instructions still hanging in the air. The next afternoon, the hospital released Elena Moretti with strict orders. No stress, no rich food, no theatrical gatherings disguised as family obligations. The warning landed like an insult in Luca's world, where every lunch was negotiation and every room came with an audience. Still, he obeyed. 2 days later, he moved the family meal from a private club to his Manhattan townhouse and cut the guest list down to almost nothing. Almost. 8 social circle guests still found their way into the polished dining room, drawn by habit, curiosity, and the scent of weakness in powerful families. Their voices were soft, but not kind. Their sympathy wore expensive watches. A string quartet recording drifted from hidden speakers. Silver gleamed. Linen sat untouched. Elena Moretti, wrapped in a pale cashmere shawl near the window, looked at the table as if it belonged to another century. Then she asked a question that froze the room. "Where is Amara Bennett?" One of the women nearest the wine service blinked. Another gave a tight smile, the kind people used when trying not to show offense on behalf of their class. Luca looked up from the place card he had been shifting for no real reason. "She doesn't work here," he said quietly. "This is lunch at home." Elena Moretti turned her face toward him with fragile patience and old authority. "I know exactly where I am." Her voice was thinner than usual, but not weaker. "I asked for Amara Bennett." Within seconds, the air changed. Luca had not called her. He had told himself that the hospital night was an emergency, not the beginning of anything. But his mother rarely repeated herself, and after what had happened, refusing her felt smaller than pride. He stepped away from the table, made the call himself, and heard his own voice flatten into formality when Amara Bennett answered. He expected hesitation. He heard none. An hour later, she entered the townhouse in a dark navy dress, so simple it made everyone else look overdressed. No diamonds. No performance. Just composure. One of the 6 restaurant staff had dropped off a small paper bag with the soup Elena Moretti had liked at the restaurant, packed carefully and still warm. Amara Bennett carried it with both hands as if it deserved respect. The wealthy guests studied her the way privileged people studied any surprise. First for flaws, then for threat. Elena Moretti saved her from the room by lifting her hand. "Come sit near me." Amara Bennett did not rush. She greeted Elena Moretti first, not Luca, and she did it in Italian so soft the language seemed to change temperature in the room. "Did you rest at all today?" A flicker passed across Elena Moretti's face. Relief. Recognition. Home. Their conversation unfolded without spectacle. Amara Bennett adjusted a napkin on Elena Moretti's lap without making her feel helpless. She tested the soup with the back of a spoon, cooled it, and offered it without fuss. She listened when Elena Moretti complained about the vulgarity of hospital gelatin, the noise of machines, the humiliation of being watched while sleeping. Most people at that table would have laughed politely and changed the subject. Amara Bennett understood that dignity often sounded like irritation in people who had lost control of their own bodies. So she answered with seriousness. "You were not difficult," she said. "You were frightened. Those are different things." The room went still. One guest tried to re-enter the conversation with a story about a cardiologist in Zurich. Another suggested a wellness retreat in Napa. Elena Moretti barely acknowledged them. Crystal glasses caught the chandelier light and threw it across the private dining room like tiny knives. Conversation returned in pieces after Elena Moretti's blunt exchange with Amara Bennett, but it returned changed. The jazz from the hidden speakers sounded too polished now, too eager to cover what everybody had just witnessed. The only person Elena Moretti had truly answered all evening was the waitress. That was all wealthy people needed. Not facts. A pattern. A possibility. A story they could enjoy before dessert. By the time espresso cups arrived, the 8 social circle guests had already begun building one. Their smiles stayed soft. Their eyes did not. One woman in a silk bronze dress leaned toward Luca Moretti as if sharing concern. "Your mother seems unusually comfortable tonight," she said. "That young woman has a gift." The pause around the last word did the real work. A man across from her added, "Manhattan is full of ambitious people. One never knows what language they've been practicing or for whom." Luca heard the insult beneath the elegance. He set his glass down with more force than he intended. "She was helping my mother." The table went quiet for one beat. Then came the small social retreat of the privileged. Lifted brows, careful shrugs, eyes that said they had only meant the best. Amara Bennett did not need to hear every word to understand the room. She had spent too many years carrying trays through rich people's assumptions not to recognize the temperature of contempt. It moved faster than steam. It reached her near the service station, where one of the 6 restaurant staff avoided her eyes while folding linen napkins that had already been folded. Within an hour, the rumor had traveled from the private room to the kitchen corridor, from the kitchen corridor to management, and from management into that ugly corporate tone that pretended to be professionalism. The general manager asked Amara to step into the office before her shift ended. A spreadsheet glowed on the computer monitor. Inventory sheets lay stacked beside a half-eaten protein bar. The room smelled faintly of printer heat and stale coffee. Nothing in it looked dramatic. Humiliation rarely did. The general manager clasped both hands on the desk. "There's concern," he said. "Perception matters here." Amara stood very still. Concern about what? He exhaled as though she were making this hard for him. About boundaries. About visibility. About whether your interactions with Luca Moretti appear personal. Appear, not are. Her face did not change, but something inside her drew tight. She had worked too many double shifts, swallowed too many patronizing smiles, and rebuilt too much of her life to be reduced to a woman hunting for a rich exit. "I was serving a table," she said. "You were speaking Italian with his mother in the middle of a private event." Because Elena Moretti needed someone to answer her without pity. The general manager looked away first. That almost made it worse. "I'm advising distance," he said. "For your sake and the restaurant's. No formal accusation. No written warning. Just the oldest punishment in polished spaces. Make the person with less power carry the shame." When she stepped back onto the floor, two of the restaurant staff suddenly found reasons to be busy elsewhere. Another offered a sympathetic look that was somehow more painful than cruelty. Sympathy meant the rumor had already hardened into identity. At the front of the restaurant, Luca was waiting for his car to be brought around. He saw her crossing the lobby with her apron folded over one arm and understood immediately that something had happened. He moved toward her. "Amara Bennett." She stopped but did not soften. "What did they say to you?" The question was sharper than comfort. He was angry already, and that anger came from a world where anger solved things. Amara lifted her chin. "Nothing I haven't heard before. Just dressed better." Luca glanced toward the office hallway. "I can fix this." That was the one sentence guaranteed to wound her. The laugh that left her was quiet and without humor. The laugh that left her was quiet and without humor. It landed harder than a slap. The hallway outside the private dining room glowed in low amber light, polished brass catching the last flicker of candle flame from the party behind them. Music still drifted from the main floor, but softer now, as if the restaurant itself had leaned in to listen. Luca Moretti stood with his jaw locked, all force and instinct. Amara Bennett looked at him the way people looked at storms they had survived before. "I don't need fixing," she said. That should have ended it. In his world, most people either accepted help or feared refusing it. Amara did neither. She reached for the tray, stand by the service station, steady hands, steady breath, trying to return herself to work. But Luca did something he had not done once that night. He stopped pushing. "What do you need, then?" he asked. The question changed the air between them. For a second, Amara said nothing. The 6 restaurant staff moved through the dining room behind her and practiced silence, pretending not to watch. The 8 social circle guests had returned to their wine, their gossip lowered but alive. Beyond all of them, Elena Moretti remained seated inside the private room, fragile but upright, one hand resting on the edge of the white tablecloth as if anchoring herself to the evening. Amara set a stack of dessert plates down with careful precision. "For people to stop acting shocked that I know something they didn't expect." Luca's expression tightened. Italian, among other things. That answer held more than defiance. It held history. Luca heard it this time. He followed her into the narrow service pantry, where the clatter of dishes and hiss of the espresso machine gave them cover. Stainless steel shelves reflected broken slices of light. A worn leather tote sat near the employee lockers, half open. Amara pulled a server pad from her apron, meaning to check tables, but a folded paper slipped from the bag and fell to the floor. Luca bent first. Amara moved fast to stop him, then stopped herself. It was old. Cream paper, softened at the edges. A certificate. Florentine lettering across the top. The seal had faded, but not enough to hide its origin. University of Florence. Luca looked up. "You studied there?" Amara exhaled once, long and thin, as if something private had just chosen its own moment to be exposed. "For 2 years. The noise around them seemed to retreat. She took the paper from his hand, but not angrily. More like someone reclaiming a piece of herself. It was a scholarship, she said. Language preservation. My father worked with oral history archives before he died. He believed languages disappear twice. First from schools, then from homes. Luca said nothing. For once, silence was not power. It was respect. Amara leaned against the metal counter, eyes lowered to the old seal. Italian mattered to him because it was one of the first languages he taught me to hear for music, not just meaning. He said every language carries a different kind of memory. Her mouth curved, but the smile did not last. When I got into Florence, it felt like proof that his life had meant something outside our apartment walls. And then, money. The word was blunt, clean. Scholarships cover tuition better than living, better than grief. She folded the paper with practiced care. My mother got sick. Bills stacked up in New York. I came home. Then home needed rent. Then home needed groceries. Then home needed me not to dream so expensively. The line hit him harder than any accusation from the guests ever could. Luca studied her as if seeing the architecture beneath the surface at last. The precision in her speech, the discipline in her restraint, the fluency she had hidden because every version of being noticed had come with a cost. Why keep it quiet, he asked. That made her laugh again, but this time the sound carried fatigue instead of steel. The laugh faded into the soft clink of glassware and the low hum of Manhattan traffic beyond the restaurant windows. Candlelight moved across Amara Bennett's face, catching the exhaustion she no longer bothered to hide. Around them, the 6 members of the restaurant staff drifted through closing duties, wiping tables, stacking plates, resetting a room that had watched too many quiet humiliations and one impossible act of grace. Because being seen has never come free, she said at last. That answer should have slowed Luca Moretti down. Instead, it planted a reckless kind of urgency in him. By noon the next day, his office 40 floors above Midtown was all glass, chrome, and intention. He stood at the window with his phone in one hand and a folder in the other, already moving pieces into place the way he had built companies, bought failing brands, and bent stubborn markets to his will. He called a director at an arts foundation his family had funded for years. He called a curator from Florence. He called in a favor from a board member who owed him 3. Within hours, a position existed. Not charity, he told himself. Restoration. A 1-year cultural fellowship. Paid housing. A salary that would let her leave double shifts behind. Access to museum archives. Travel between New York and Florence. A title elegant enough to dignify the rescue. He never asked what Amara Bennett wanted. That evening, the private room upstairs was too polished to feel kind. White roses. Crystal water glasses. A city view trying too hard. Elena Moretti sat near the window with a shawl around her shoulders, stronger than she had been days ago, but still pale enough to make every movement look precious. Luca had invited her because he imagined her presence would make the offer warmer. Human. Unthreatening. Amara arrived still wearing black work slacks and the fatigue of a woman who had not been told the truth about where she was being summoned. One of the restaurant staff had simply said Luca needed 10 minutes. Her eyes moved from the roses to the folder in front of his plate, then to Elena Moretti, then back to Luca. What is this? His smile came too quickly. An opportunity. He slid the folder across the table. Heavy paper. Foundation letterhead. Her name centered in elegant serif type, as if a life could be redesigned by typography. Silence thickened. Amara opened the folder. Read the first page. Then the second. Her face did not brighten. It closed. Luca kept talking, mistaking stillness for consideration. You said Florence changed you. This gets you back into that world. Research, language work, cultural programming. You would be incredible at it. Her fingers pressed harder into the paper. You arranged my future, she said, very quietly. I created an opening. You decided what I should become. No, his voice sharpened before he could soften it. I saw what you were being denied. The room chilled. Amara set the folder down with almost delicate care, which was worse than if she had thrown it. That is exactly the problem. Elena Moretti's gaze lifted slowly to her son. Amara stood. You heard one story about what I lost. and rushed to build me a prettier cage. That's not fair, Luca said. The words landed like a slap because fairness had always sounded different in the mouth of a man who could manufacture options for other people before lunch. Her eyes flashed, hurt finally outrunning restraint. You think because your version has art and a salary and Florence attached to it, it isn't control. But it is still you deciding. Still you choosing the shape of my life before asking whether I wanted your hand on it at all. Luca rose too. Instinct. Defense. I was trying to help. I know, she said, and somehow that was crueler than anger. That's what makes it worse. The city lights behind the glass trembled in the reflected shine of tears she refused to let fall. Powerful men always call it help when they move a woman without permission. Crystal glasses chimed under the hotel ballroom lights, and then one shattered. Heads turned. Music faltered. A silver fork spun off a linen-draped table and skittered across the marble floor. In the sudden break of polished laughter and donor applause, Elena Moretti's hand slipped from the back of her chair as if the room itself had tilted beneath her. The charity gala had been built for spectacle, floor-to-ceiling windows over Midtown, candles reflected in black glass, the 8 social circle guests arranged near Luca Moretti like planets around money. But fear did not care about elegance. It moved faster than status. Elena's face drained of color. Her breath came short. One shoulder sagged. The conversation around her became useless noise. Luca reached her first by instinct, too fast and not yet steady. Call someone, he snapped, already catching her elbow, trying to lift rather than ground. Panic sharpened him. It also made him clumsy. Elena winced. Her dignity began to vanish in public before the danger had even found a name. Amara Bennett was moving before the last note of the quartet died. Not toward Luca, toward Elena. Don't crowd her, Amara said, and her voice cut clean through silk, crystal, and male authority. One hand touched Luca's wrist just long enough to stop him from pulling Elena upright. The other found Elena's shoulder, gentle and sure. Let her sit. Give her air. The ballroom hesitated. Within seconds, silence. Luca stared at Amara as if the whole room had shifted under his feet again. This was not a dining room. Not a disagreement over choices made for her. Not a space where her role could be mistaken for service. This was crisis. Public. Unforgiving. And Amara was the calmest person in it. Elena's eyes fluttered with confusion and embarrassment. Her lips trembled. Then Amara bent close and spoke in soft, fluent Italian. Va tutto bene. Sono qua. Nessuno ti umiliera, Elena. Something in Elena's face changed at once. Not health. Not yet. Trust. The older woman clutched Amara's hand with a fragile, frightened strength. Around them, the wealthy guests pretended not to stare and failed. One guest had already half risen with a phone in hand before Luca turned with such force that the device disappeared back into a tuxedo pocket. Another guest began offering loud, useless suggestions. Water, sugar, space, a doctor. Everyone wanted to be near the emergency without accepting the shame of witnessing it. Amara did not look up. Luca, kneel so she sees only you and me. Slow everything down. For one beat. He did not move because no one spoke to him that way in public. Then he did. He crouched beside his mother's chair, expensive trousers against the polished floor, while Amara loosened the silk scarf at Elena's throat and kept speaking in Italian, low and rhythmic, like she was building a bridge one sentence at a time. Not commands. Anchors. Breathe with me. Good. Again. You are not a spectacle. Look at me. Bene. The medical team arrived within minutes. 3 professionals cutting through the frozen crowd with practiced urgency. They checked Elena's pulse, blood pressure, oxygen. One asked questions, another prepared transport. Through all of it, Amara stayed at Elena's side, translating comfort into language and pace, making sure every touch was explained before it happened. That was what Luca noticed. Not efficiency, respect. When the wheelchair came, Elena's fingers tightened in panic again. Being rolled out under chandeliers, and watchful eyes would feel like collapse made public. Amara saw it before anyone else. She stepped in front of the chair, blocking the sight line from half the ballroom. then slipped off her own black evening wrap and laid it gently across Elena's lap like a shield. "No one gets to take this moment from you," Amara murmured in Italian. Elena nodded once, chin shaking. Luca walked beside them through the corridor, but the shape of power had changed. Money opened elevators. Reputation cleared hallways. Neither could do what Amara was doing with a hand, a voice, and the stubborn refusal to let fear become humiliation. At the hospital, fluorescent light replaced candlelight. Fluorescent light flattened every face in the waiting area, turning silk into paper and confidence into posture. The medical team moved with efficient calm beyond the glass doors while Elena Moretti was taken in for evaluation, the folded letter still resting in her lap until a nurse gently asked for it and placed it inside her handbag. Luca Moretti stood when he was told to stand, sat when he was told to sit, signed what needed signing, and discovered how small a billionaire's signature looked beside a mother's trembling pulse on a monitor. Amara Bennett did not hover. That was the first thing that undid him. After making sure Elena had water, a blanket, and the dignity of privacy, Amara stepped back to the far end of the corridor near a vending machine humming under cold white light. Her black work shoes were still marked by the restaurant floor. Her hair had loosened at the temples. The evening had taken from her too. Time. Safety. The right to leave when her shift ended. Yet she asked for nothing. That silence became its own judgment. Luca watched the doors close behind the medical team, then looked at the space beside him where control usually stood. It was empty. No assistant. No legal buffer. No polished explanation. Just the memory of his own voice at dinner, sharp with ownership, and the sound of Amara's voice answering Elena in the language of home. He crossed the corridor slowly, as if speed itself would be another form of arrogance. Amara glanced up when his shadow touched the tile near her feet. She looked tired, alert, guarded. Not hostile. That was harder to bear. "I won't keep you long," Lucas said. A tiny, almost ironic breath left her. "You usually decide the length of things before anyone else can." He accepted the blow. He had earned it. "Yes," he said. "That is exactly the problem." For a moment, the hallway held only the faint beep of machines and the rattle of an ice dispenser somewhere out of sight. Luca did not reach for charm. He did not reach for gratitude as a shortcut to forgiveness. He stood there with empty hands. "I need to say this plainly," he said. "What happened tonight is on me. I made a room smaller the moment I walked into it. I made you carry the weight of my ego, my guests, and my family's fear. I treated you like service when you were the only person actually serving what mattered." Amara said nothing, but she did not walk away. "I am sorry," he continued. "Not because my mother needed you. Not because I was embarrassed. Not because the wrong people saw it. I am sorry because I saw your dignity and still pushed against it." The words landed without polish. That was why they sounded true. Amara folded her arms, less defensive than steadying herself. "Do you know what made tonight so ugly? My behavior. Yes, but more than that." Her eyes held his. "You assumed access was affection. You thought if you cared strongly enough, you could direct everyone around you. Your mother, the room, me." He nodded once. "I learned that in business," Lucas said, "and then I used it in places where it becomes cruelty." The sentence seemed to surprise even him. Amara looked down the corridor toward Elena's room. "She loves you. That's obvious. I know. But love is not the same as being handled." That one cut deeper because it reached his mother too. He let the truth stay there. No defense. No neat turn. Then he took a breath and made the only offer that did not insult her. "I asked someone at Florence years ago about a scholarship student who left before finishing. I should not have done it behind your back, and I won't do it again." He paused. "But I learned enough to know what was interrupted." Her expression changed. Not softened. Sharpened. "You investigated me. I made an inquiry. Quietly. That was another boundary I crossed." He looked directly at her. He looked directly at her. Amara did not step back. The city hummed below them through the hospital window, all sirens and light trails and sleepless glass. Behind the closed door, Elena Moretti rested under a pale blanket, her breathing finally even. The medical team had left them with a silence that felt earned. "You made an inquiry," Amara said, her voice low. About a part of my life I never offered you. Luca took the hit without blinking. For once, he did not defend himself with money, speed, or certainty. Yes, that scholarship was not unfinished because I lacked discipline. I know. It ended because my father got sick, then my mother, and bills do not care how gifted you are. Her chin lifted. I did not leave Florence because I failed. I left because life became expensive. Something in him gave way at the plainness of that truth. Not dramatic. Worse. Human. I know that too, he said softly. And I know that none of it gave me the right to go looking. Amara studied him for a long second, as if deciding whether remorse was real when spoken by a man used to being forgiven before he deserved it. Then the door opened. Elena stood there in her robe, one hand on the frame, silver hair loose at her shoulders, eyes tired but bright. Luca moved instantly. Mama, you should be in bed. And miss this. Elena said, dry as old paper and warm as candlelight. Absolutely not. Amara crossed the room just as fast, guiding Elena back toward the chair instead of the bed, adjusting the blanket over her knees with instinctive care. Elena caught her hand before she could pull away. No more standing apart, Elena said. Both of you. Sit. It was not a request. They obeyed. Elena looked first at Amara. You gave me back my language when fear had taken it. Her fingers tightened gently around Amara's. Do you know what that means to an old woman far from home? Amara's eyes shimmered, but she stayed composed. I only spoke to you the way I would have wanted someone to speak to my own mother. Yes, Elena said. That is exactly why it mattered. Then she turned to Luca. And you. A pause. Sharp enough to cut. You finally found something you cannot buy, and therefore do not know how to approach. A breath of helpless laughter escaped him. That sounds accurate. It is more than accurate. It is overdue. Elena leaned back, tired but absolutely in command. For years, people admired your reach. Very few asked about your depth. She did not come into your life to be impressed by your name. She came into it and showed you your own smallness. Luca did not flinch. I know. No, Elena said. Tonight you know. The room went still. Elena lifted Amara's hand and placed it, deliberately, into Luca's. Neither moved. When I was frightened, Elena said, she gave me dignity. When you were ashamed, she gave you truth. If you are wise, Luca Moretti, you will understand that this is rarer than love that begins with admiration. He looked at Amara then, not like a man making a move, not like a billionaire closing a deal, but like someone standing at the edge of the only honest sentence he had ever feared to say. I don't want your gratitude, he said. I don't want your forgiveness on credit. And I don't want a version of you that becomes smaller so I can feel larger. His thumb shifted once against her hand. Careful. Unhidden. I want to know you in the life you actually lived. I want to deserve being near it. And if you let me try, I will not cross another line without your permission. Amara's breath caught. All at once, the first night in the restaurant seemed very far away. The polished arrogance, the cruel certainty, the room arranged around his power. That man could command attention. This one had learned how to ask. She looked down at their joined hands, then back at him.